thank you all for coming. I can see we've got a great attendance list here. I can see there's names here from all over the world, so that's really good. I'm not going to make any assumptions here about your previous technical level and previous technical skill. I'm going to start with the basics, and we'll work through to some of the more advanced things that you can do. Now, your files and your data with Windows, and I've got Windows 7 here, but it applies equally to Vista. Things are slightly different with XP, but I'll explain where there are changes. And your files and data are the most important thing to you on your computer, without a shadow of a doubt. People might try and convince you, and companies might try and convince you that it's their software that you cannot live without, or their operating system that you simply can't do without, but it's your files and your data that is the critical thing. So we need to make sure that you can keep it secure and that you never have any trouble with it. So I'm going to split this presentation into 4 different parts. In the first part, we're going to look at how you can move your files and your data away from Windows 7 to keep them safe and secure to begin with. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about backup and encrypting your files. Then we'll talk about how, if Windows really does go completely wrong and you have to reinstall Windows, how you can still rescue files on your hard disk. And then in the last part, I'll look at some advanced file and data recovery. So I'm trying to get the chat window opening here. It's not working for me, but that's technology. Maybe I will, for a future webcast, I'll do troubleshooting chat windows. So, first of all, introduction. Who am I? I have a very nice introduction there. That was very nice. I'm a Microsoft MVP. Most valuable professional, have been just since January this year. I'm the author of Troubleshooting Windows 7 Inside Out from Microsoft Press, and also, if you go searching for it, the Windows 7 Power Users Guide, which I self-published and which is completely free. It's about 170 pages, but Troubleshooting Windows 7 is a good way to it's a good resource, and obviously I can recommend it. And I'm also a news editor at Windows7news.com, Windows8news.com, and ghacks.net, 3 technology websites. And you can see down the bottom of these slides, you can see I'm on Facebook. You can join me on Facebook, which I think is the best way to find out what's going on, to get help and support, because I aggregate everything on the Facebook group. So go onto Facebook and search for Mike Halsey MVP. I'm on Twitter at Mike_Halsey. All the articles go there, but there's more stuff, occasional giveaways and competitions on Facebook, and you'll see the Twitter handle down the bottom, #TRBWin7, for this presentation under that. So, part 1. Moving your files and data away from Windows. So, still trying to get this chat window to work, but it's not working, but never mind, it will. I'm sure you're all still out there. So, why should you move your files away from Windows 7? Well, there's a couple of reasons here. Windows, by default, assumes that you've just got one hard disk in your computer and one partition, which is a logical disk on that actual hard disk. So it puts the files on the same hard disk or same partition that it is installed on, because it doesn't know. Windows on its own isn't intelligent. It's not looking for. It's not assuming that you've got other spare hard disks or other spare partitions on those hard disks on your computer that it can move your files to keep them safe and secure. It's disappointing with hardware manufacturers, because whilst it's becoming more common, especially with laptop manufacturers, that when you buy a computer, it'll split the hard drive. They'll split the hard drive into two partitions. So you'll have a C drive, which will have Windows on it, and the D drive, which will generally be empty, which is there for your files. They won't move the default files, user folders, over onto this other drive. So we're going to have a look at how we can do this. The other reason for moving your files and your data over is that if Windows fails, you could lose everything and lose all of your files. But this is a could, and we will tackle this. So, how do you move your files across? Well, it's actually very, very simple in Windows 7 and Windows Vista. It's more complicated in XP, but I'll talk about that a little bit afterwards. In Windows 7 and Windows Vista, it says here, as I say here, open the Start menu, right-click on the computer icon, and select Manage from the little context menu that appears. Then the disk management or the management console window will open, and in the panel on the left-hand side you'll see a link for disk management, and you'll want to click on that. And you may want to just work through and have a look at these steps on your own computer while I'm going through it. So right-click on the computer link in the Start menu and select Manage, and then in the management console window that appears, click on disk management. Then, now it depends on whether or not, this next step, on whether or not you already have a second hard disk, a spare hard disk, or a spare partition on your computer. But if you haven't, we need to be able to create a spare partition on your hard disk so that you can move the files. Now, in this disk manager, you will see there's a graphic that will display your hard disk, and it may just be one big long box, your C drive. So you want to right-click on that disk or that partition, and from the context menu that appears, select Shrink Volume. Now this will, Windows can shrink down the size of this partition and give you space after it to create another one for your files. I'll talk a bit in a minute about the space you want. Here we are. The amount of space you want to shrink it by will vary. Now, let's say, for instance, that you, let's look at some of the different types of PC users that we have. If you are a light user, let's say you just use email, you do some photo editing, you use Skype to communicate with people around the world, then you're not really going to need an awful lot of space for your Windows installation. If you do gaming, then you'll probably need quite a bit of space for your Windows installation. If you use specialist software such as design software and other packages like that, maybe Photoshop, then you'll again need a lot of space. So it's a trade-up on your particular hard disk of how much space you devote to this additional partition for files. So the things you need to take into account are, firstly, Windows will make sure that it'll only shrink the Windows drive by so much, and so it'll make sure that it has plenty of space. But you may not want to accept its recommendation. You may want less space for your files. It all depends on, do you feel that you need more space for your Windows installation and less space for your files, or do you want more space for your files and keep the Windows installation to its minimum size? Now, this latter option is what Windows will give you by default. It'll say, okay, well, we'll shrink this Windows partition down to as small as we're prepared to get it, and then we've got extra space for you, and you can move your files into that. So it's have a think about how big you want these partitions to be. So select the amount of space here that you want to shrink your partition by. Now, you will have some unallocated space now next to your C drive, so we need to create a new partition in here. So you want to right-click on it and select the new simple volume option to create a new drive. Now, it'll offer you a size for this drive and make the volume the full available size, as I say here, but you'll see there's a little star there. There's a little caveat. Now, let's say, for instance, your computer has got a 1 terabyte hard drive in it, and you don't need all of that space for your files. You shrunk Windows down, and now you've got an awful lot of space. Let's say that you want some space to be able to keep a backup copy of Windows, or backups of installation software. You might want to create 2 simple volumes of different sizes in the space that you've got available, and not just the 1. We'll assume here that, especially if you've got something like a laptop where hard drive space is at a minimum, you might just want to create 1 drive, so you want to set it to the maximum available size. But again, if you want 2 drives, have a think about how big you want these to be.